Welcome to the Aftershock. My name is Phillip Leyva, and I'm here with Jamon Moore and Alex Morgan. And guys, 2-0 loss at home to the Portland Timbers. We have goals from Yemichara and Marvin Luria. Sorry, I got a little feedback there. And for our press conference today, it looks like we're going to have Matias Almeyda for sure, Eric Remedi, and it looks like we're also going to have Benji Kikanovic lined up as well. Guys, let me start here with Jamon. What went wrong in this match, Jamon?
I think it started before the game. I know Matias was looking to inject some energy into the game, but they should have anticipated Portland was not going to come out and try the high press that they were facing with other teams. It was the wrong place. To not start Showfeast at the 10. All it did was push Wondo, and it also pushed Rios both higher. And it forced them to try to play through the wings, and the attack was extremely predictable. There really wasn't any time in the game where you go like, man, they were really dangerous in that situation, really should have scored. I mean, other than the penalty, most everything was like a half chance. It really wasn't giving, the best opportunities to be able to score. And when you get down early, Portland just parked the bus even more, and you didn't really have the right people to be able to solve that problem.
Yeah, I agree, Jamon. I think it speaks to the fact that, in general, the Quakes have struggled against teams that sit deep. They don't know how to break down those defensive blocks. They haven't figured out how to do that yet so far this season. We thought that Showfeast would be able to help with that when he was subbed on in the second half. But to be honest, I don't think he really did. You were saying maybe he should have started, maybe he would have been more helpful in that position from the outset, but he didn't really get on the ball in the second half. So, I'm not sure that he would have helped much in that first half either. So at this stage, I just think the Quakes had a sleepy performance. I don't think that Matias Almeyda set them up with the right patterns to be able to break down that mid block.
My response back to that is just that when Showfeast came on in the second half, he wasn't asked to play a 10. He was asked to play a winger. And so a lot of times he was just spent like standing out on the side, just kind of like waiting for the team to win the ball so that he could be useful in transition. It's not to be argumentative. It's just to say like the substitutions that happened in this game, clearly Almeyda was like going for it, but going for it in a way that I just didn't feel like had any sort of cohesiveness to it. And I think what we saw was a mixed bag of attempts to do something, but largely a bunch of ineffective crossing that didn't really go anywhere. And even when a cross went through, and there were a couple of them, players weren't in the right position for it. People didn't seem to know where they were supposed to be. I think it was just like, hey, let's throw on a bunch of attackers and see if they can create something out of nothing, maybe a bunch of confusion in the box. And in the end, it didn't really produce a lot of danger. The expected goals is very high, partially because of the penalty, but partially because just like a bunch of nothing type chances added up to a lot of expected goals.
Yeah, so if I could just come in here, Alex, for a second. You mentioned the expected goals were pretty high. I thought, Jamon, in the first half that the Quakes did create a lot of opportunities in the attack. And one thing that we saw that was a little bit different from the previous matches was we saw the fullbacks actually pushing more towards the end line and getting bounding forward into the attack. And we actually not only saw chances created from Paul Marie and Lucio Abakasis, but they actually got in and went in on goal and almost scored themselves, right? So I thought that was one big difference with this team that we saw in the first half. But then, they kind of fell flat as the match progressed, and Portland really took advantage of a lot of the situations in which they possessed the ball, which wasn't often throughout the match.
Yeah, I actually thought that, Paul Marie and Lucio Abakasis were two of San Jose's best players in the first half. And, we've been talking about the Paul Marie redemption arc now for a couple weeks. And honestly, I think he's probably been San Jose's best fullback so far this season. Tonight, he looked really good on both sides of the ball again. He whipped in a couple really dangerous passes, both with his right and left feet. And he just brought on a lot of energy. And, I think defensively, he also has a lot of pace. And that's something that the Quakes were kind of lacking last week. But now we have I think the press conference with Matias Almeyda that we're going to have to run to. Or not. It could have just been that they were testing. We had a false alarm there. They were testing the microphone. I'm going to continue on my train of thought about Paul Marie because I was building up a head of steam there. All of which is to say that, he has a lot of pace. I think they lacked that. Marcos Lopez hasn't been entirely convincing so far. He missed a lot of preseason. So he looked, I think, pretty shaky in the first couple of games. And so I was glad to see Paul Marie back in the starting lineup, actually. Kind of expected it after the Seattle loss. Matias said he was going to rotate a lot of players. And he did well. Now, bear in mind, he wasn't put in, as many dangerous situations as the Quakes were last week against Seattle. But I still think he showed well. And Abakasis did on the other side. In fact, I actually think that Paul Marie probably should have stayed on. I would have liked to see him go those full 90 minutes. I think his pace and his crossing would have been helpful. And also his energy would have been helpful in that second half. Instead, Almeyda kept on Abakasis. And it felt weird because he was playing on the same side as Chofis, and they both kind of like to occupy the same space inside. And they didn't really combine well. Abakasis isn't, I just don't think he's the right guy to have in those late game situations. And I think as Jamon started to say, I was a little perplexed by some of the substitutions that Almeyda made in the end there. He brought on
I wanted to talk
Skahan and Kikanovic as well. And I don't think either of them really contributed much. And, I'm curious to see what you have to say, Phil, before I go on a long tangent here.
No worries, man. No worries. I just felt like since we're already talking about the substitutions and you mentioned the player rotations that we should have expected Matias Almeyda to be rotating players in certain positions of the field. One that actually surprised a lot of folks was the Andy Rios start. Just kind of looking at what was happening on social media. Now, some of us kind of weren't too surprised, but Andy Rios in the first half is something that I really wanted to talk about. And before we get to the substitution which Skane came on for him, I actually liked a lot of what I saw from Andy Rios in the buildup in the attack. One of the things that I noticed from him was his technique when the Quakes were in the buildup. So one thing that we don't always see from the players is finding the best pass, positioning their hips so that they're actually moving the ball in the right direction. And I caught this at least 3 times from Andy Rios during this match. And one instance that was really impressive was a ball that was sent in over the top. And Rios actually brought it down, something that we haven't seen from him too often, his aerial technique. And he was able to very quickly spread it out to the right flank. So Rios's ability to kind of spread the ball around the pitch was really impressive, I thought, in this match. And finding a way to make the most of being in that position where we kind of expected Chofis to be at the beginning before the lineup was released.
Yeah, Quakes Epicenter writer Asher Cohn talked about this last year about how he's this kind of high pivot type 10 that can play back to goal. And I think some of those are the situations I think you're talking about, Phil. The problem for me really kind of came around the fact that he would sometimes get into the attack, but once everything started to compress, it felt like he was competing for some of the same space as Kate Cowell. And they were both like occupying center backs or not occupying center backs. It wasn't really clear. I know Danielle Slayton on the broadcast mentioned something about they weren't able to there wasn't enough movement up top. And that's very difficult to do in a low block situation. You don't really tend to be able to have the forwards create a lot of movement because no one's going to follow with them. So the movement doesn't actually go anywhere, right? And what we would have liked to have seen a bit more of, Alex and I both, as we were, talking with each other about what we were kind of seeing from our higher tactical, kind of view that we've got here in the press box, was we would have liked to see more of the Paul Marie type runs. You actually mentioned, Phil, how dangerous he was in a particular situation or two there. That was because of the off-the-ball runs he was making in behind, and he was forcing the outside backs to have to decide whether they were going to go with him or whether they were going to stay with the other winger on the side, typically Carlos Fierro, but occasionally Cristian Espinoza. And that's the kind of dangerous run that you do want in that kind of low block.
So, Jamon, I would
but
like
just
to
not
add something on
just
here
not
real quick.
enough of that in the right situations.
And in regards to that, the team getting like bottled up in the Portland defense. If you go back and watch, I don't know if you'd actually want to go back and watch this match, but I'm just going to provide a piece of evidence here to support the argument that you just made in regard to the team kind of getting bottled up and not knowing, not having an outlet of attack once they got there into the attacking part of the pitch. And if you watch about the 57th minute, you'll notice that all four of the attacking players, we're talking about, I think at this moment it was Andy Rios because he hadn't been subbed off yet, Cade Cowell, Carlos Fierro, and Cristian Espinoza right before the sub happened. All were kind of just like wandering around. And actually, right before he got subbed off, we saw this really awkward moment where Fierro kind of brings the ball and he pushes in from the deeper part of the midfield, pushes it into the attack, and he actually crossed it towards Cristian Espinoza. So that just tells me that the team was completely discombobulated in the attack and they weren't finding any position. The wingers were like onto one side, the forwards were kind of pushed in, and there was nobody out on the left flank at all. There was just this big empty gap on the left flank, and of course, Portland ended up getting possession of the ball once the ball was spread out to that direction because nobody was there.
And the other thing that happens when you throw on as many attackers as they had at the end of the game, and this also happened against the low block earlier in the game, although we don't have as good of a view of the line in the first half as we did in the second, was that a lot of times you'd have just four players across. And when you have four players across, anyone who's played at any high level of soccer knows that you can really kind of defend that with just two defenders. There's really no real danger with that unless something changes that particular movement. So either someone's got to come in, someone new has to go in behind, there needs to be a run down the middle, but something has to change. What Matias does not ask is for Cade Cowell to be that guy to make the off the ball movements. He wants Cade, I believe, to occupy the center backs while other people make the other movements. And if Cade has an opportunity to pull off one because of the movements of other players and create space for himself, great. That's the kind of thing Chris Wondolowski is an expert at, of course. But I think the problem starts to come in, and he's new to it, right? Occupying two center backs and him playing a 9 and doing these kinds of things. We have to understand he's still figuring this out. But the problem is if everyone else around him is not doing the right movements, Cade's not going to be in a position to be dangerous. Tonight, there really wasn't a situation where Cade Cowell felt like really dangerous. There was one ball that went long, and if he was able to run onto it and be able to go forward, you could hear the energy in the stadium. The fans were like, Cade's going to do something. And then when it falls, there's nothing he can do with it that actually keeps that momentum going. The defense has recovered by that point. And I told Alex, it just felt like the wind went out of the stadium, even though the ball was still at Cade's feet, which I thought was a really kind of interesting thing.
And I do want to zoom out here a little bit because I think it's been very disappointing that the Quakes are now goalless after 2 home matches. I'm seeing a lot of comments here in the chat. That they're goalless after 2 home matches. And I think that's put a pin in that. That's particularly important because they only have one more match at home. They play Sporting Kansas City at home again very shortly. And then they're on the road for like basically 2 months. They have a 2-month stretch where the only match they play in San Jose is the Cali Clasico. And so now is the time that they need to be going out and getting those wins. And now actually the press conference is starting. So we're going to go over to that now.
Hi, Coach.
Hi, Coach. Good evening.
Sorry for the loss.
Obviously,
you had a chance to tie the game with a penalty kick. But other than that, it felt like the team was very much chasing the game. Played very aggressive, putting on a lot of attackers. Try to get back into the game, but ultimately didn't score any goals tonight. Two straight games without a goal.
What are you seeing that needs to be better at the attack to get back to scoring the goals that you started off the season scoring?
Obviamente tuvieron la oportunidad con el penal que cerró. Se pareció que el equipo estaba buscando el partido, que intentaba, y más con los cambios ofensivos que hiciste. Pero ya van 2 partidos seguidos sin poder concretar los goles. ¿Qué puedes analizar y qué puedes decir que hay que mejorar para que ya empiecen a meter los goles?
Primero, buenas noches.
Firstly, good evening.
Yo creo que el fútbol es simple.
I think football is simple.
Si haces goles y no te hacen, ganás.
If you score and they don't, you win.
Y si te hacen goles y vos no hacés, perdés.
And if you concede and you don't score,
Hoy fue un partido muy parecido al partido pasado,
today was a very similar game to last game.
porque volvimos a crear muchas situaciones y a agarrar muchos goles de cabeza, en el mismo penal, tiros que quedaban ahí que no podíamos tocarla. Y bueno, el rival llegó 2 veces, Clara, con peligro y convirtió. Y ante estos equipos no hay que equivocarse.
I think it was
Entonces,
similar.
seguiremos trabajando para concretar las situaciones que tenemos.
I think it was similar to last game because we created many chances, headers, even the penalty, even shots that we weren't able to get a tap in to get into the back of the net. And it's against like this team and like last game, against these teams, if you don't forgive, they don't forgive you. And they had 2 chances they were able to put away, and we weren't able to put away. It's very simple.
Thank you, Matias. Next question from Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Matias, you brought in some fresh legs tonight. In particular, Benji got his MLS debut, and I believe this was Jack's first moments of the season. What did you make of their performances? And in mixing up your lineup on the night, who did you think stood out for you? Thanks.
Dice que tuviste una pierna fresca, por ejemplo, Benji debutó en la MLS y también ya con los primeros minutos del año. ¿Qué pensás del rendimiento de cada uno de ellos? Y si hay algún jugador que sobresalió hoy para vos.
No, a mí me da placer poder debutar a ellos, a los jóvenes.
It gives me pleasure to be able to debut them, the youngsters.
No es fácil entrar en esta clase de partidos.
It's not easy to come on in these types of games.
A veces esa tensión, los nervios por querer hacer todo bien, puede ser que no hagas todo bien.
Sometimes that attention, those nerves, where you try to do everything well, it makes it so you don't do things well.
Pero este es el equipo que tenemos, con muchos jóvenes.
But this is the team that we have with lots of youngsters.
Y que el día que cada uno de ellos tenga 40 partidos en la primera división, digamos, si siguen esta línea de juego, este estilo, seguramente seremos más competitivos.
And the day that they have 40 games with the first team under their belt, surely if they keep up this system, this style of playing, we'll compete differently.
Thank you, Matias. Next question from Alex Morgan.
Unmuted.
Hi, Matias. It's good to see you. Condolences on the loss. You now have missed, I think, the team has missed 2 of the 3 penalties that you guys have had this season. You know, as a coach, is that something you think about a lot? Do you think it's, you know, random that, you know, eventually they'll start scoring them again? You know, do you have conversations about who now is the, you know, the penalty taker? You know, how do you, are you worried about the situation at all? How do you handle the penalties at this point?
Muted.
Este año el equipo erró 2 de los 3 penales que le dieron. Como entrenador, si eso te preocupa, si eso cambia la manera de seleccionar quién patea los penales, o para vos es algo que ya que se termina y son momentos que pasan, y si ya es algo que te preocupa y si es algo que hay que entrenar.
Se entrena.
You have to train it.
Creo que hoy, si había que elegir uno que pateara el penal, era el máximo goleador que tiene el club y que tiene la liga.
I think if we had to pick a penalty taker tonight, it would be the all-time scorer for the club and the league.
Pero creo que el penal de hoy hay mucha virtud del arquero.
But I think today's penalty, there's lots of virtues from the opponent, from the keeper.
El penal estuvo bien ejecutado, el arquero llegó 1.91, estiró el brazo y llegó al lado del palo.
The penalty was executed well, and the goalkeeper was 6'3". He stretched his arm out and he got next to the post.
Pero no me detengo en un penal nada más, creo en las formas, cómo llegamos, cómo por ahí nos faltó la definición, más allá del penal, nos faltó esa definición fina al final.
But I don't just take away the penalty, I take away the chances we created, how we were able to get there. We were just missing the finishing at the end.
Thank you, Matias. We have one final question in English from Jeff Carlisle.
Thank you, Jake. Hello, Matias. In the last two games, both teams have sat in pretty deep and been very compact playing against you. And these teams know you well. Do you expect to see those tactics from other teams going forward? And as a follow-up, do you think you should have made more of, or your team should have made more of the transition opportunities that they had? Because it seemed like a couple times they went sideways when there was an opportunity to be more aggressive.
Dice que en los últimos dos partidos enfrentaste equipos que esperaron y contra equipos compactos. Si vos pensás que eso es una estrategia que los otros equipos ahora van a copiar, dado los resultados, y si pensás que el equipo podía haber sido más agresivo en la transición, porque a veces como que el equipo le faltaba ir un poco más para adelante y jugaba mucho lateralmente.
Ojalá que el fútbol de Estados Unidos no haga esa parte de esperar.
Hopefully American soccer doesn't do that, with sitting deep.
Creo que sería un retroceso en nuestro fútbol. Yo creo que nosotros por intermedio de nuestro juego llevamos al rival a que se meta atrás.
I think that would be a step back in the game. And us, through our game, we make the opponent sit deep.
Porque las características de Seattle y de Portland nunca fueron estas.
Because Portland and Seattle's characteristics were never these.
Y tienen dos grandes entrenadores con gusto futbolístico que yo admiro.
And they have two great coaches whose taste in football I admire.
Y de verdad que no creo que jueguen a esperar ellos. No juegan a esperar.
And I don't think that they sit deep. I don't think that's what they do.
Sí, el ritmo del partido fue ese, que nosotros los llevamos por intermedio de nuestro control a meterlos en su campo. De hecho, en un momento, en gran parte del partido estaban los 11 jugadores en su campo.
But I think through our game, we put them there. The rhythm of the game played out that way. And as a matter of fact, through our play, 11 of their players were sitting behind the ball.
Y así y todo, nosotros creamos situaciones por los costados, un poco por el medio.
And like that, we still created chances on the flanks or through the middle.
Pero repito, creo que el fútbol hay que hacer los goles, si no, digamos, todo el control, todo el juego, todas las llegadas quedan en 1-0 abajo. Esa es la realidad.
But again, in football, you have to score your goals. You know, you can have your chances, but if you don't put them away, it's 1-0 down.
Thank you, Matias. And to wrap us up, we're going to take two questions in Spanish from Carlos Ramirez.
Profe, un abrazo. ¿Cómo te va? Carlos Ramírez de Telemundo.
¿Qué tal, Carlos? ¿Cómo estás?
Profe, no se ha dicho hasta ahora, me sorprende, es el tercer partido en 8 días que juega este equipo. Y eso creo que hay que tomarlo en consideración para el análisis. ¿Lo consideras como un factor a la hora de entender la cantidad de oportunidades que se crearon y que se fallaron? Digo, se jugó el miércoles tras 3 días de descanso solamente, se juega hoy tras 3 días de descanso. Es un factor para el análisis, ¿no?
Sí, por ahí un análisis más fino, más profundo, no solamente con el resultado, ¿no? Porque si hubiese empatado, hubiésemos ganado, por ahí no nos fijamos esto, pero sí, de verdad que se desgastan bastante los jugadores, poco tiempo de descanso. Por ahí el partido pasado, el que había descansado menos era Seattle. En ese sentido no está, digamos, parejos en tiempos y en descanso. A veces te toca a favor, a veces en contra. Pero no es un justificativo, creo que hoy lo que lleva a eso es que va a haber muchos jugadores lesionados, ¿no? Porque eso sí es verdad el gran problema de esto. Después, bueno, uno puede empatar, puede ganar, te puede ir mal. Lo importante es que ellos no se lastimen. Y después entra el recambio. Nosotros somos un plantel corto, con 2 jugadores por puestos y con muchos jóvenes. Entonces, va a ser así. Este es San José, que va a ser así de acá hasta el final.
Y para cerrar, Matías, en medio de las noticias complicadas que hemos tenido todos en el año, ¿cómo se sintió tener a Benjamín hoy en el estadio?
Bueno, ya Benja la segunda vez que viene. Siempre es lindo verlo y lo importante es que él pueda seguir recuperándose de la mejor manera. Y bueno, no le pudimos regalar un triunfo hoy, pero no importa. Será el próximo, si Dios quiere.
Gracias, Matías.
Un abrazo, Carlos.
All right. Thank you very much, Matias and Augustine. That's it for tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So maybe one thing we should talk about to start, Alex, is the penalty kick that Wondolowski, because that was something that got brought up here. That was your question, actually, to Matias Almeyda. I mean, what do you think about his response, and where does the team go forward from here?
I mean, I think it was first and foremost a good save. I think Almeyda's right. It was a well-struck penalty in the bottom corner. And I think Jamon has some data here, actually, about the randomness of penalties. And Jamon, I guess I'll throw to you about the stats about, what is the likelihood San Jose would miss 2 of their, first 3 penalties this season?
Yeah, I wasn't able to quickly get the 2 out of 3 number, but I can tell you that when you get 3 75% chances, that's what these are, because that's what the rate of penalty scoring is in MLS, and has been very consistently that for a long time. So the chance that you don't convert any of them is 2%. It's very small chance, but it is possible, obviously. The chance of only scoring any of the 3 is more like it's very high. The possibility that probably you don't score 2 of them is really about 20 to 30%. So it's not that high. It's certainly not something that the Quakes want, but it is kind of within the realm of possibility. I'm not personally convinced that spending time practicing penalties is the best thing for this team. You've got quality penalty takers and Alanis and Wondo, and also consider that you've had 3 different penalty takers step up. If you had one penalty taker that keeps stepping up and keeps missing, I think you go back and question it. There's been no consistency. If Wando's not on the field, Alanis is taking that, and I think we might be having a different conversation. That's just my feeling about it. Because if Alanis misses, right, and he made the last one, it's one conversation. If Alanis starts to make 2, now you start to go like, well, does Alanis start taking the penalties going forward because he keeps making them, at least until he misses. So, these are all, more like random chances. And if Wondo takes another, 8 or 9 penalties, he's probably likely to make 6 of them or so. That's just the way it goes.
It's a lot of speculation at this point. And in the chat, we had John Jay say, Alanis should just take the PKs until he misses one. Right.
Yeah.
So, but again, going to what you said, Jamon, I mean, we would be having a different conversation if Alanis stepped up, doesn't make the shot, or if Wondo is not on the field at all, wearing the captain's armband, or just simply the guy that usually steps up to take the penalty kicks.
Well, I think it's a really interesting conversation now, because they've had 3 different penalty takers, and it sounds like, based on what Matias was saying, that when Wando's on the field, he's still the go-to guy. He said, if you have a guy who's the MLS all-time top goal scorer, he's going to take the penalties. But now that Wando's missed one, and now that Alanis made one, I guess it's sort of an open question. Do you just go with Alanis next time? And so we'll see. As Jamon's saying, there's a lot of randomness, but tonight that was one of those random events, I think, that sort of had a huge impact on this game, because there was I think a huge momentum change in that moment. The Quakes had just subbed on Chris Wondolowski and Chofis and Shea Salinas. And, those were the 3 subs, the same kind of subs that had propelled them to victory, a comeback victory against Real Salt Lake a couple of weeks ago. And when they won that penalty, it looked like, oh man, it's going to be another comeback for the Quakes. They were really well positioned for that. Wondo misses, it gets saved. And sort of the life was sucked out of it. And then I think he made those 2 weird subs and bringing on Skahan and Kikanovic. And they didn't really, I don't think they really panned out. And that was just one that the Quakes let the game get away from them.
They didn't necessarily have the impact that Matias Almeyda wanted, right? And that was actually something that Alicia Rodriguez brought up in the press conference, asking Matias Almeyda how he felt about those players and coming in. And it's kind of sounded to me like Matias was giving sort of like the general answer about supporting his players. These are young guys. They're going to get their opportunities. They're going to need time to, they're going to need to rotate, right? The team is going to. One thing I wanted to mention really quickly, though, you talked about the opportunity to score the goal and get back into the game. And, despite that and the randomness, I know that's the motif that keeps coming up here, right? The randomness of missing a penalty kick, the randomness of the pace of the game or the events that occur during the game. I strongly feel that Portland earned this win against the Quakes. Like, I don't think that the ref had a poor match. I don't necessarily think that anything happened other than the Portland Timbers outplayed the Earthquakes in this match. And the Quakes had some great opportunities. They had a lot of possession. They created, the chances from different areas of the field. But overall, if you look at the two goals, the one that Jimmy Chara scores, Williamson makes a brilliant run through the midfield. And that's one thing that I think the Quakes really are going to have to look at in the tape is how are they going to defend against these deep runs from the midfield? Because that's a really dangerous aspect of the attack that Portland brought. And it's not the first time that we've seen this, guys. We've seen this in other matches too. And in the pregame chat on Twitter, we did our Twitter Spaces. We talked about the how that's going to be an issue, right? How the central midfielders are going to track back, and the role that Judson often has for this team. Is Yule going to be the guy that goes back? Is Eric Remedi going to be the guy that goes back? And in this case, it was Yule, and it didn't quite work out. And as Matt Richardson says, could have used a Judson tracking that run. Absolutely agree with that. I do want to mention really quickly, Alex, before I shoot it over to you. The second goal, I just felt at that point of the match in the 74th minute, the Timbers wanted the win more than the Quakes did. I have no doubt about that. But I mean, look, on the field, you see Mora go up for the ball. He wins the header. He gets the second. He beats him on the first touch. He passes the ball out to a wide open. I don't remember who set up the assist there. It might have been Jimmy Chara. But anyway, it's like a perfect ball sent in. And then the Quakes had a third opportunity to win the ball, and it gets sent to the back post. And who's there? Marvin Loria, who just tucks it away. It's just a sad moment for the team. It's just a matter of one team wanting it more than the other. And I'm not saying that the Quakes didn't play a hard game, trying to create chances, trying to defend. But the fact is the Timbers went out there and they wanted it more.
I don't think that was a matter of desire, Phil. I think both of those goals were rooted in tactical issues. And the main tactical issue is probably Eric Remedi, because for the first goal, he overcommitted in the midfield, gets beat, and then you sort of have a cascade of errors. Jackson Ewell doesn't entirely track his man. Florian Youngworth steps out and gets beat. And so it was really Eric Remedi overcommitting in the midfield. And, that's the spot that I think a lot of people are saying in the chat. That's where you need Judson. Judson, I think if he's on the field, the Quakes don't allow that goal because he just doesn't overcommit in front of the back line like that. And I think Eric Remedi has probably been involved in most of San Jose's goals that they've allowed so far this season. And in games where they're scoring a ton, that's fine, right? They beat DC United 3-1, Dallas 4-1, score lines like that. That's fine. They can allow a goal or two and they're still going to win. But in tighter games against better teams like Portland and Seattle, it's going to cost them if they keep allowing goals at this pace. And I think that's why they need Judson back in the lineup, because he will, I think, sort of stop that trickle of goals. And I think you mentioned the second goal as well. Eric Remedi also, I think, was partly at fault for the second goal because he had been dropped into the back line as a center back, but he's just really not defensively, I think, strong enough to play center back. Against RSL, it worked because he was sort of driving the ball forward and the Quakes were attacking a ton. But defensively in this game, he was sort of caught like all over the field, wasn't in position for Portland's second goal. And so that's how the ball got to the far post, and that's how that goal happened. And I think at that point, what needed to happen was Almeyda needed to bring on Judson and then put Judson in center back and keep Alanis in the midfield. And instead, what he did was he brought on Jack Scahan. And to me, that just made no sense because Jack Scahan is me and Jamon were saying this in the game. He's basically a blueprint of Jackson Ewell, just not nearly as good. And so they offer very similar things. And so it was just it felt like a very redundant substitute when bringing on Judson would have clearly helped stop those counterattacks. And so I think that, as much as Portland played well, I think, and deserved the victory, that's for sure. But I think you can definitely, for Matias Almeyda, point to a couple really key decisions that he made that just didn't pan out tonight as well.
So I'm gonna real quick, because Jamon, I know you're probably gonna want to jump in here as well. I'm gonna go ahead and double down on the point that I made here, and I think like certain elements can both be right, Alex. I think tactically there could be some things that could have been ironed out a lot better. The substitutions didn't work, but look, this is a trend that has continued as far as the scoring effort in terms of the effort from the players on the pitch. If you take a look at the set pieces, for example, the Quakes have only scored on a single set piece, and that's if you count penalties as a set piece as well. They have not scored from a single set piece other than the Alanis goal earlier this year. So that just tells me that, I mean, you could call it a matter of physicality, you could call it a matter of tactics, but other teams are able to score on set pieces without having to worry about those elements as well. So it's just as I mentioned before, something that keeps popping up with this team in terms of them going out there and fighting harder than the other player to win the ball and to put it in the back of the net or prevent the other team from doing so. And I think if you take a look at that second goal, again, that's a perfect example of a Quakes player getting beaten, the other team's creating a scoring opportunity, and then actually going and finishing the goal.
I mean, look, Phil, I agree that set pieces have very obviously been a problem. I think they were very bad again tonight for like the third or fourth game in a row now that San Jose is attacking set pieces. They're just hitting all the balls to the near post, getting cleared, not finding the right heads, just really not, and goals are only scored on, like, I think the stat that Jamon has is like 2% of corners in soccer, right? But it's really just the fact that the Quakes never even look dangerous. It doesn't even feel like they're going to create a dangerous chance from an attacking set piece at this point. And so I agree with you that those have been a problem. I don't think it's a matter of like energy or desire. I think the Quakes have a lot of that, and you saw that in the first four games of the season. I think it's more execution and tactical issues at this point that Almeyda has to figure out.
Quick point here. How many games have the Quakes played in the last 8 days?
They played a lot.
At least 3, right? They had the game against RSL on Friday, and then they had the game against Seattle on Wednesday, and then they got to turn right around and play. I mean, these were a couple home games, right? I mean, they went to Salt Lake, they flew to Salt Lake, they came home, they play the match against the Sounders, they lose, they don't quite seem to pick up the momentum to get a win against Portland. I mean, it looks like this ended up being a perfect trap game, right? Portland comes in, they have a lot of injuries. It looks like it could be an easy win. A lot of us thought that the Quakes were going to pull this one out easily, and they didn't do it.
It's 100% a trap game. We talk about this in other sports, but not so much in soccer. But yeah, when you're at the very beginning of the season, you're not maybe at 100% fitness where you can play 3 games in 8 days and feel like you can give 100% at all times because the fitness isn't quite tuned to that level. It's very much, putting the eggs in the basket about Seattle and then like, oh crap, we lost. Now we got to turn around and play Portland, right? So, I think there's a lot of that. I also feel like, we're seeing the same types of goals, and I want to, I don't want to put this completely on this team in Almeyda. It's actually an issue with the man marking defenses worldwide. If you watch any team that does man marking, Leeds United, Atalanta in Serie A, pick one. They actually have the same weaknesses, which is when there's one defensive problem in the middle of the pitch, there tends to be domino effects, and that's what Alex was talking about. And we saw tonight 2 situations where those domino effects happen, where if you're not sharp, if you're not right on it, when you got to the 3rd game and they're not very sharp. Espinoza is joining us.
So let's go ahead and get started with Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. Cristian, condolences on the loss this evening. You had a few really, really good balls tonight that nobody got on the end of, unfortunately. What do you think is going on right now with in the last couple of games with the team being unable to score goals all of a sudden?
Dice que tuviste unas buenas jugadas, muy buenos centros, pero desafortunadamente el equipo no las pudo concretar. ¿Qué tú crees que está pasando con el equipo en esos últimos partidos donde no pueden definir cómo lo hacen?
No, justamente lo que ella dijo, nos falta estar más atentos en los últimos metros, que es donde realmente tenemos que hacer la diferencia, porque en definitiva es donde se hacen los goles.
Yeah, just I think you're right in the sense that we need to be a little closer, better in our finishing, especially when it comes to receiving crosses or any kind of plays.
Y creo que lo veníamos haciendo muy bien y estos últimos dos partidos, por una cuestión a veces de suerte, otras veces por virtudes del rival, no pudimos concretar nuestras chances, pero seguimos trabajando de la misma manera, seguimos para adelante porque tenemos partidos muy importantes que vienen y no es momento de bajar los brazos.
And I think there were similarities from previous games, whether it was luck or the players were able to finish a little better. But there's no time for us to dwell on those mistakes. I think we just need to look forward and continue to improve our game and focus on how we have been playing.
Thank you, Cristian. Next question from Alex Morgan.
Unmuted.
Hi, Cristian. Thank you for speaking with us and condolences on the loss. In terms of your own personal performances, how do you think that you can get, on the ball in more dangerous situations? And how do you think that, you can have more offensive contributions going forward? Because, at least tonight, it looked like you had trouble finding space in the spaces that you usually, succeed a lot.
Muted.
Dice que cómo crees que puedes tratar de ser un jugador un poco más ofensivo, que por lo menos el día de hoy él te vio con dificultades, tratando de crear espacios o hacer jugadas. ¿Cómo tú crees que puedes ser un poco mejor en la parte ofensiva de tu estilo de juego?
Yo creo que el partido de hoy fue difícil para todos nosotros, para los atacantes, por una cuestión de que el equipo rival lo único que hizo fue esperar adentro del área, protegerse durante todo el partido y salir de contra, y de esa forma consiguieron el gol. A mí en lo personal no siento que ninguno de mis compañeros, ni yo incluido, hagamos en el aspecto ofensivo hagamos hecho un mal partido, sino que a veces cuando vos tenés un rival que prácticamente los 11 jugadores están metidos dentro del área, obviamente que es difícil encontrar espacios, no hay espacio. Entonces tenemos que buscar la manera de generar el juego y quizás a veces no llega tanto por afuera y a veces más por adentro. Pero el partido de hoy se presentó así, de esa manera. Ellos fueron un equipo que se metieron adentro del área, esperando a tener un error nuestro para salir de contra.
I think today's match was really difficult in the sense that the team tonight, the opponent would just back off a little bit. We're playing a little more defensive, and then all they were looking for was just a counterattack. Personally, I nor my fellow teammates on the attack, I don't think any of us really made any huge mistakes. When you have a team like that all they're trying to do is counterattack, it does make it a lot more difficult for us to find spaces. So we need to look at whether we need to open up the sides a little bit more or play through the middle. But having an opponent like that definitely makes it a lot more harder when you're trying to create space or just create any kind of attacking plays.
Thank you, Cristian. We're going to take 3 more questions, starting with Jamon Moore.
Hi, Cristian, and thank you for taking the time with us tonight. It's your 3rd game in the last 8 days. Obviously, you get a bit of rest before you face Sporting Kansas City, and you don't need to travel for that game. But how are you feeling? How are you and your teammates feeling now, 6 games into the season, physically, to be able to withstand the rigors of the season and to be able to play these type of compressed games?
Dice que es el tercer juego en 8 días y que el próximo van a tener unos días más para descansar y para prepararse. Que cómo se siente el plantel ahorita yendo al 6º partido de la temporada, tanto en lo físico como en lo químico entre el grupo.
El grupo está, la verdad, que realmente bien. Estamos bien, porque de hecho estamos jugando bien. Si vos te pones a analizar los últimos 2 partidos, jugamos contra dos grandes equipos y a los dos grandes equipos nosotros los metimos en su arco. No pudimos conseguir los 3 puntos, no pudimos hacer goles, obviamente, pero en cuanto al juego, yo creo que el equipo está mostrando un alto nivel de juego. Pero bueno, esto es fútbol y muchas veces el equipo que a veces más intenta no significa que va a ser el equipo que va a ganar. Esto ya es de toda la vida así. A veces hay equipos que juegan más a la defensiva, son estilos, son gustos y no es nuestro caso. Nosotros tratamos de ir a buscar todos los partidos y bueno, son los riesgos que nosotros tomamos y lo vamos a seguir haciendo porque es lo que nos está dando resultados en los últimos partidos.
The team feels really well. If you were to analyze the last 2 matches, personally, I believe that we have been playing really well. However, it is football. You know, the one that makes it in is the one that gets to win, and so we haven't been able to finalize our shots very efficiently, but this is just how it is. Some teams like to defend a little bit more. Each team has their own style of plays, their likes. For us, that's not the case. We try to go for the win for each game. So we're going to continue on that path. But I think we've been doing well so far this season.
Thank you, Cristian. 2 more questions, starting with Jeff Carlisle.
Sorry about that. Sorry for the delay. Cristian, you talked a little bit about how Portland was looking to counter. Do you need to be doing something different when you guys have the ball and you have them pinned in their half? I mean, do you need to use the middle more, the flanks more? I mean, it seemed like you guys were all over the field tonight, but is there something else that you could be doing, do you think, that might make the attack more effective?
Dice que hablas de cómo Portland se echó un poco más para atrás, que si tú crees que el equipo tiene que ser algo más diferente en esos momentos, en esas jugadas, ya sea jugar por el medio, jugar por las bandas, que si puedes explicarte un poco más en ese sentido.
No, fue lo que hicimos este partido y lo que hicimos el anterior partido con Seattle, que tratamos por todos lados, sinceramente, y hemos llegado por todos lados, por más que el equipo se haya metido atrás. Hemos llegado por izquierda, hemos llegado por derecha, hemos hecho jugadas por el medio, jugadas de pelota parada, lo intentamos, la verdad, de todas las maneras y, como dije en la anterior respuesta, esto es fútbol y a veces el equipo que más intenta no es el que siempre gana.
No, I think we've been able to really make all sorts of plays, not just tonight, but in the previous game. We made plays on the sides, through the left, through the right. We made plays through the middle, and we've been able to follow through with them and have close chances. But like I said on the previous response, this is football, and the one that does not have the most chances, the most shots, does not always score or win. So we're just looking to do as much as we can in that sense.
Thank you. Last question from Carlos Ramirez.
Cristian, ¿cómo te va? Carlos Mauricio, un abrazo.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien?
Bien. Cristian, ¿cuál es el principal problema defensivo del equipo que en los últimos, o de los 6 partidos que va de temporada, en 4 de ellos les han anotado primero el rival, y de esas 4 veces, 3 fueron o en los primeros 5 o en los últimos 5 minutos del primer tiempo?
Yo creo que es parte del riesgo que nosotros tomamos en salir jugando desde atrás. Es nuestro estilo, lo vamos a seguir haciendo porque incluso el año pasado, cuando parecía que todo iba mal, quizás todo el mundo se esperaba que San José cambie su manera de jugar. Pero nosotros tenemos un estilo en el cual lo estuvimos buscando durante los últimos 2 años. Este año yo creo que el estilo está más definido que nunca, las cosas nos están saliendo dentro de todo mejor y nada, seguiremos por este camino. Como te digo, son errores que a veces pasan y así como yo puedo tener un error arriba de no hacer un gol o de errar un penal o lo que sea, la defensa también tiene sus riesgos en tratar de salir jugando y bueno, son cosas que pasan, estamos todos juntos en esto y no va a cambiar nuestra manera de jugar por más que que se cometan errores.
Por último, Cristian, ¿cómo le explicarías tú al aficionado que nunca jugó fútbol profesional cómo se puede mejorar la definición a gol? Porque los que hemos estado, bien sea como periodistas o en cualquier categoría cerca del fútbol, sabemos que se trabaja todos los días, todas las semanas. Pero ¿cómo le explicarías tú al aficionado de los Quakes cómo se puede mejorar la definición de cara a gol?
Yo creo que como vos lo explicaste, con trabajo, seguir mirando para adelante, entrenar cada día más, tratar de estar fino quizás en esa circunstancia, porque muchas veces uno piensa que la pelota no llega, no va a llegar, y de golpe te cae la pelota ahí y tenés que estar listo para poder definir bien.
Gracias, Cristian.
All right. Thank you very much, Cristian, and thank you all for being with us tonight. We will see you next Saturday.
Wow, just had a moment to go through and read some of the chat. There's a lot of disagreement on what's happening with this team, which is always the case after a loss, right? Everybody's trying to figure out what actually happened, what went wrong. And I mean, that's why we're having this show, right? So we can discuss these things. So one thing that I want to bring us back around to is formation talk and the tactical approach that the team had in terms of attacking and trying to break through the Portland defense and the way that Portland set up to defend against the San Jose Earthquakes attack. Jamon, why don't you take us back to that direction before we get to our last member of the press conference, which I don't know if we have confirmation on that yet.
I don't think we're going to have another member of the press conference here. It sounded like Jake was wrapping up. So we had Almeyda and Espinoza tonight, but it sounds like that's it for tonight.
Fair enough. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and go back to this chat a little bit on the formation and how Portland was sitting in on the defensive element of their game. So Jamon, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
What I want to challenge is the narrative that was kind of put forth in the press conference, both by Almeyda and by Cristian Espinoza, and by one of the questioners actually, which was that the teams are sitting back on the Quakes. The Quakes got sat back on because they gave up early goals. Let's be honest. If you watch the Seattle game, they ran a very interesting high press. In fact, we may write about it for Epicenter. I know someone from MLSsoccer.com has also been analyzing that game and mentioned to me they may write about that press because it was a very different kind of press that Seattle ran, and it was a very aggressive high press that they ran. Once they got the goal, when you're on the road and you get a goal, teams are going to sit back. By the way, that's what the Quakes used to do all the time. Don Kinnear was the master of sitting back if he got a goal on the road, right? So Michael is right. Stop conceding early. That's the problem.
100% agree.
Fix that. Fix the conceding early problem, and teams will come out and play you, right? You're on the road. You're at home. You need to be the aggressor. You need to get the first goal. The teams that get the first goal in this league win the majority of the games. That's the way it is. So you've got to come after that first goal, and you've got to be smart enough to not concede. That's what the problem is. Against Sporting Kansas City, that's what has to be fixed.
And I do agree with some of these comments that it was pretty discouraging, though, more discouraging than the loss against Seattle. I think John Jay makes a good point here. I don't think the Seattle loss was one to hang their heads over. They had, I think, a pretty good expected goals in that game. They had a couple of clear-cut chances that they could have made. And the Seattle Sounders are, quite frankly, probably the best team in MLS right now. And the Quakes, kept themselves in it for most of the game. So, that wasn't a particularly fun match, but I think it was a pretty good performance. Tonight was neither fun, nor do I think it was a particularly good performance from the Quakes. So I think it's not quite time to panic, as Diane is saying here. But I think there's definitely going to have to be kind of a reset for Matias Almeyda in terms of how he's sort of mentally approaching these games. And how he starts to face those different kinds of pressing systems that Jamon was talking about, like an accordion press that is, really high and really, intense in the front line, but then also they're sitting back deep so that Cade Cowell doesn't have space in behind. And how they're going to face those situations, I think he needs to start thinking about, a couple, plan Bs and different options for the Quakes here.
Okay, so guys, I have gone through the list of things that I wanted to talk about in terms of this match. So I'm going to hand it off to Jamon. Since Alex just spoke, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it back over to you for any other thoughts you have about the match, any other analysis, or if you're ready to go ahead and get into the closing thoughts. Since we're about 55 minutes into the show, we can go ahead and take it there as well.
Yeah, let's get into closing thoughts. I want to let everyone know that we're going to have some good content coming for you also on Quakes Epicenter. Now that we've got a week between matches, we can all kind of take a deep breath. We're going to have some things coming your way. A new video from Colin Etnier breaking down the salary as information that came out the last week. His salary spreadsheet is updated already on Quakes Epicenter. If you're interested in that, feel free to go check it out. But we got a video from him coming. Also, I'm going to be sitting down with Daniel Sperry, who used to be a podcaster for the Earthquakes on a show at Jill Soria called the 2474 Show. He's going to join me to help break down Sporting Kansas City because he writes and covers Sporting Kansas City, but he is a Quakes fan at heart. And so that's going to be another thing. And I know, Alex, you may have an article coming. I'll let you talk about that if you do. So just to let you guys know, he may be coming, right? So just to let you guys know, we got some content coming this week. If you're interested in supporting us, quakesepicenter.com/Patreon. You can read about the Patreon. Why do we have one? Certainly, we're at 90 patrons right now. Thank you to every one of our patrons for their support. Would love to get that to 100. If you are interested in just $2 a month, get you early access to content. If you can do a little more, we'll give you access into the Slack, where the game chat was very hot tonight. And Brian mentioned, and the Slack. Yes, the Slack is definitely the favorite feature of the whole thing. So if you can afford the extra $3, go in for the whole $5. You actually get a 10% discount if you take the annual option. We've had a lot of people taking that now. And that's good for us because that lets us maybe get some of the investments and equipment and other things that we wanted to do to support this show and make it even better and be able to do some of that earlier. So thank you to everyone who's supporting it. And we're going to make everything better as a result of your contributions. Other than that, from the game tonight, I think that Cristian Almeyda or Cristian Espinoza there kind of said the right things. It is soccer. There is an element of randomness that seems to be the theme for the night. I agree with the sentiment that Seattle was kind of like a good loss as losses go. Where you can take a lot of positives out of that. But I also agree with the sentiment that tonight was neither fun nor good. They need to figure out kind of what went wrong with that. But I think giving up the early goal is really the big problem. You solve that, and you're on the front foot. You get the first goal. I bet you're going to see a different outcome. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. So, Alex, as we get to your final thoughts, I want to hear more about this article that you're going to write. Are we going to get a little preview here, or are you just going to drop it out of nowhere? What's going on with it?
Well, I think one of the sort of sneaky storylines that I've noticed this season is as I mentioned at the top of the show, how successful Paul Marie has been in that fullback role, and how that makes the conversation about the fullbacks really interesting now. That you have 4 of them who have all been rotating this season. Last season, I think it was pretty locked in with Nick Lima and Marcos Lopez. And, that was very obviously San Jose's best, 2 options at fullback. But now they have Abacasius, Thompson, Lopez, and Paul Marie all rotating. And it's not entirely clear which I think is the best combination. And it might depend on the game situation. But I do think that it's pretty remarkable how much Paul Marie has improved. So I guess now I've sort of cornered myself, and I have to write an article about Paul Marie's various strengths and weaknesses thus far this season. So yes, I think that the Quakes Epicenter patrons and fans can look out for that. I would say the other things that I'd mention about the match tonight are they had Oswaldo Alanis back in the back line for Tanner Beeson. Oswaldo Alanis had been out for the last couple games with sort of a mystery knee injury. And so it's good that he's back in the starting lineup and that he's available. I thought he played solidly tonight. I think his composure is useful back there, and I think he complements Florian Youngworth well. Florian Youngworth's aggression and energy. I think sort of needs a cool head beside him, and that is Oswaldo Alanis. I think Jamon might argue that Tanner Beeson should get a shout there as well because of sort of his aerial skills and maybe his distribution as well. But I thought Alanis played well tonight, so that's a good thing from tonight. I thought another positive was Carlos Fierro. I thought that he was again playing well. I think that he's probably been one of their best creators in that midfield, especially stepping inside in sort of an inside position and playing more in the middle. I thought he's been excellent, and I was surprised that he was subbed. I was surprised that he was subbed.
That right before you go.
the Carlos Fierro is I guess that might be a controversial take. I know that the fans have been talking a lot about his role. But look, he was the one who won the penalty with his cross. He was also the one against RSL who whipped in that ball for Chris Wondolowski's winner. I think Fierro has been playing very well, and I think he's especially important in those last sort of late game situations because he has good crossing on his right foot. And so I was very surprised that he was taken out. I would have liked to see him stay in. And then, look, I mean, I guess to sort of bring it full circle, the Quakes played poorly tonight. I think they're going to need to rebound against Sporting Kansas City to get, a win at home before they go on that long road trip. But, I mean, even though they played poorly, they still could have – I think they still could have come away with the victory if Chris Wondolowski had buried that penalty. And I think that was one of those, big moments that totally changed the momentum of the game. So, even though they struggled, even though they lost, I don't think they're that far off. I don't think it's anything that the Quakes fans should be panicking about yet. I think if it comes down to fixing one or two things, maybe putting Judson back in the middle, finishing their chances more, figuring out a couple of those tactical issues, the Quakes can still be very good this season.
Well, we'll find out on Saturday next week at 7 p.m. The Quakes will play Sporting Kansas City, and we will have another Aftershock episode right after that. Another thing I want to mention before we get out of here is the Slack, and that is if you are contributing at least $5 to the Patreon monthly. I didn't read that message. Is that Stu that just put that up there? Your shows are the perfect length of my drive back from San Jose to San Francisco. I'm literally walking in my apartment in SA.
Phil, I threw that in because Stu is one of the amazing Quakes fans in our Slack channel. And I thought that tonight, all of Stu's comments were excellent in the Slack channel. I thought he had some very astute points in there. So, yes, we wanted to give a shout out to Stu and his support.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Let me tighten this up here. Sorry, I got a little spread out. So anyway, if you go to quakesepicenter.com, you can find Colin's spreadsheet, which we should have some content regarding that later on in the week. And you can also find the access to the Patreon for $2 a month. Just $2 a month, you can become a member, and you get exclusive content. You get who is it? Your brother, Alex, your brother's pictures will be released to you exclusively. You will have early access to the articles. And for $5, you can join the Slack, where we have a lot of fun. We have like custom emojis and all kinds of cool stuff. That's quakesepicenter.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Quakes Epicenter. And you can also follow these gentlemen. Alex is at Quakes_talk.
You got it
right this time. At Jamon Moore Quakes for Jamon. You can follow me at Phil. This is Phil. And that's it. That's all I have, guys. So I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. And whether you're actually watching live on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, either way, I just wanted to say thanks and go Quakes.